Our next speaker I'd like to introduce is Mark. Mark's story is stress and worry at work led to the Sydney hydrologist, got that out, to consider ending his life. After a conversation with his girlfriend, he felt a weight had lifted off his shoulders. Soon Mark was seeing a psychologist and taking antidepressants. Mark's been back at work for more than a year and has started giving talks for mates in construction and to help others and workers in need. Can you please welcome Mark?
G'day. Just before I start, there's a little bit of a disclaimer. I'm not the greatest public speaker. It doesn't matter how much I practice. I seem to, I can't really learn it all off by heart. Anyway, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First off, I'd like to show my respects and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, of elders past and present, in which this meeting takes place today. I would also like to extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who are present here today. I'd like to extend my gratitude to mates in construction for giving me the opportunity to share my story and discuss mental health as a whole with all of you today. My name is Mark Jacobsen. I come from a background of construction and have my trade certificate in hydrological surveying. Today I'll be talking to you about mental health, in particular suicide, and how close I came to making an attempt on my own life. I'll be talking about the support networks I found in my partner of 4.5 years, my employer, the journey I spent on recovery, and the day-to-day routine I use to help keep my mind healthy. I won't be sugarcoating my story, and there may be some points I'll talk about that may hit close to home for some of you experience some issues in your own life, or someone who's close to you. As you'll find out by the end of this, those who are caring for or are the main support to someone suffering from a mental illness can be extremely exhausting and draining. I want you all to know that if at any point you do feel uncomfortable or something I say does hit a raw point, I think you've all heard earlier on, you're right to let yourselves out. When I was in my teenage years, a friend of a friend was suffering from depression and anxiety. I remember I used to say to myself, why can't he just be happy and bloody get on with life? This was the first time I'd ever heard of depression actually affecting someone I knew. And I thought it was simple enough to just get on with your life and be happy. The years following, during high school, I encountered people who knew someone with depression, and I used to voice that opinion to them also. I never understood how people couldn't just move on with their problems and be happy. I was always outgoing, confident, and a very happy person. I loved to be around people in school and outside of school. I was always outdoors after school and wouldn't be home till dark. In the years following high school, I was working as a landscaper in property maintenance. I loved the job and the people I worked for, but I wasn't where I saw myself. I moved on eventually and began my career at Sydney Water for hydrometric services. I became a trainee hydrological surveyor in 2009. The work was fantastic. It was dirty, but it was fantastic. The work to life ratio was great, and I thoroughly enjoyed going to work. In late 2011, myself and 3 friends all moved into a share house together. Things in my life just seemed to be getting better and better. I'd taken a fantastic job 2 years earlier. I'd almost finished my traineeship and was on track for a full-time position with Sydney Water, thus beginning a new career that could lead me anywhere within the company. I'd just moved into the share house right on the water in Cronulla with 3 of my best mates. 2012 rolled around and I met an incredible girl, Alex, who later became my partner. I was eventually offered a full-time position once finishing my traineeship and happily accepted. As time went on, I started to feel a little bit of pressure at work that I couldn't seem to live up to. I found myself making mistakes on jobs, making mistakes with numbers, which were critical at the time and weren't discovered until later when the numbers were being crunched. In this line of work, a millimetre out of place is too far. These little mistakes I was making here and there were nothing to stress too much about, and I felt I could just pull my finger out and knuckle down a bit harder. Meanwhile, away from work, I felt I was living the dream. Living with my 3 best friends in the heart of Cronulla on the water, it was a dream to come home to. I started to find I was drinking a little bit more alcohol than usual. I was losing sleep and arriving late to work. This all happened so gradually, I didn't really notice it happening at all. My quality of work had dropped, and I started making more and more mistakes. So much so that even when I felt I was concentrating as hard as I could, I was still making mistakes and careless errors. This troubled me because to my knowledge nothing was going wrong in my life. I didn't feel like there was any reason behind my mistakes. They only got worse. Management eventually took me into an informal meeting at work to discuss the latest drop in the quality of work that I was producing. I reassured them that I would pick up my game and this wouldn't happen again. After this particular meeting, my anxiety levels picked up a little bit. I didn't know what was happening because I've never been an anxious person, nor have I ever been in a situation where my anxiety levels had risen for longer than a few minutes. I started finding it hard to come to work for fear that I was going to make more and more mistakes. As a result of my absence from work, there was a surge of anxiety that would fluctuate and feelings of letting my co-workers and management down. When I was at work, I struggled to concentrate and time seemed to drag. My mind was racing a million miles an hour. I was scared. I'd never felt anything like this before, to this extent, certainly not for the length of time I was experiencing it. It was relentless. It all came crashing down one Monday morning. I arrived at the office nervous, as per usual. I had my morning coffee, and then a second, followed by a third. Before long I was a bumbling, shaking mess. Sitting at my desk, chewing my nails to the quick, bobbing my knee furiously. I was unable to sit for any longer than 5 minutes. Sit down, up again, walk outside, smoke a cigarette, and back in I'd go. Sit down, up again, back outside, smoke a cigarette. It hadn't even reached 9 a.m. and I'd smoked half a pack of cigarettes. The anxiety I was experiencing was fast snowballing out of control. To add to this was the horrendous thoughts that something bad was happening to my body. In my mind I thought I was close to collapsing and subsequently dying right there at work. My heart was racing, I was sweating, I couldn't keep still. I was terrified. I had no idea what was going on in my body. My supervisor at work, who had noticed me in and out of the office, followed me out for one of my numerous cigarette breaks and asked the simple question, "Are you okay?" I told him I wasn't. I didn't know what was going on. He told me to take a few deep breaths and to take the rest of the day off. He advised that I go straight to the doctor and take the sick leave that they deemed necessary. So I left work, but I took the panic attack I didn't yet know I was having with me. If memory serves me right, I made it halfway home before bursting into tears. I still couldn't figure out why. This thing that was happening to my body was so new to me. I'd never felt anything like it ever before. I was scared to tell my partner Alex what was going on in my head for the same reason that I feared telling anyone. I was terrified people would think that I was crazy. I went to see my GP, who would later become one of my closest allies in this battle. I broke down in her office exclaiming I had no idea what had happened to me, what was going on in my head. With her help, she helped me fill out a standardised mental health assessment. I remember scoring in one of the highest categories for depression and the highest for anxiety. It's basically just an indicator, but I was confused. I didn't know what to expect, how long the journey would take, and what people would think of me. At least now I had a trusted medical professional explaining what I was facing. That day in particular was the beginning of a tumultuous roller coaster ride. The silver lining in this particular cloud was that it would shape who I am today, the relationships I've made, and the distance I've come, which I'm proud of. Every day was different. I would wake up some mornings happy and ready for a day at work. Other mornings I couldn't get out of bed. This routine went on for around 6 months. I consider myself lucky I was working for a company that had an understanding of the impact a mental health problem can have on someone. I recall my boss saying to me one day in a meeting we had, "Mate, a mental illness is exactly like a broken leg. The only thing is we can't see it. It needs to be treated and rested like a broken leg, and in time you'll be able to walk again." The reassurance I felt after hearing that was fantastic. I felt like that even though I had this illness no one could see, that at least they believed what was going on in my head to be true. One of the issues I always struggled with was the anxiety of worrying about what other people thought of me, whether I was putting this all on or not. I began on a daily course of medication, teamed with behavioural cognitive therapy with a psychologist. I was told things would be as good as new soon enough. That wasn't the case, and I began to worry more and more about all aspects of life. It was draining. Each night and day, I would constantly report these feelings to my girlfriend, Alex, who would do all that she could to reassure me and try to make me happy, but it just wasn't working. I reached a point where I felt it was pointless me telling people what I felt. My doctor would always ask me during my visits how I'm doing, followed closely by have you had any suicidal thoughts, which I always vehemently denied I had. That was not true. I had thought about it often, but I didn't want to tell her this. There was a fear that she was going to either mark my medical file suicidal and I would end up in a psych ward, or that this medical file would follow me wherever I went. It wasn't until I became so fed up with the constant exhaustion and draining feeling I was experiencing from suppressing these feelings that I came clean. It was a relief, a little bit of weight off the shoulders. I wasn't going to be admitted, it wouldn't follow me to different careers through life, and it felt good to say it. Things felt like they were taking a new turn. I felt motivated. I felt like things were finally working. But yet again, the black dog bites when you're feeling your best. My partner Alex had a planned European holiday coming up with some friends, which she had planned before we'd met. And this looming date fueled the anxiety as I began to wonder who I would turn to at night for support. Who I could call at the drop of a hat. I couldn't call my doctor when need be. And Alex and my doctor were the only two people that knew the in-depth detail about what was going on in my life. I pushed on the best I could. Alex helped all along the way. She reassured me things would be fine and she would endeavour to talk to me every day, which would help immensely. She had even penned a letter to me that I couldn't open until I had left. She was my rock and someone I could and had been leaning on for support this entire time. The day came and Alex left for Europe for 6 weeks. I felt good. I felt like this was my chance to be able to prove that I would be okay. And in fact it wasn't. The sleepless nights became more consistent. The absences from work more prevalent. The anxiety levels higher and higher. The huge house I was living in with friends was reduced to my bedroom, which I locked myself in for days at a time. One night while tossing and turning, I rolled over and began to cry. Some from sadness, but the overwhelming reason I believe was from exhaustion. I tried, I was tired, I was worn out, I was sick of feeling like this. I was sick of not sleeping, I was sick of the constant doctor visits. I was sick of the burden I had become to my friends, family, my girlfriend, and to everyone around me. I was so frustrated and angry that I thought I could beat this thing that was going on inside my head, but I couldn't. I remember at the beginning of this journey with the black dog thinking this would be just like a huge, long, dark tunnel, an obstacle in life, and eventually you'll find the light at the end of the tunnel and you'll be done with this particular chapter. This rang true in my mind on that particular night, and I hadn't found the light. I couldn't even see a glimmer, let alone an exit. This was it, is what I told myself. The thought of ending my life that night seemed to bring some relief. I remember the thought of winning by ending it all. The thought of a plan of how I was going to make an attempt on my life, and I next reached for a notepad on my bedside table. I began to pen my apology. I told Alex I was sorry that I couldn't do this anymore, that it had finally become too much. I told my family how gutless I felt at the fact that they'd been reading this helpless to do anything. For this I was sorry. To my mates who I lived with, I apologised. I hadn't informed them sooner of what I was going through, and just signed off, "I'll see you when I see you, love ya." I reread this note over and over. It was 2:30 in the morning. I logged onto Facebook to see if Alex had made contact the night preceding, and she had. She was still online. The time zone differences had lined up for a chat. I continued to cry as I told her what I was doing and what I had just written. We talked and talked until I was too tired and exhausted to talk anymore. She'd saved my life. I stashed the note between the base and the mattress of my bed, later to be removed and torn into tiny pieces and flushed down the toilet, never to be seen again. That moment thereon, I unknowingly began my road to recovery. I was still on medication. I would still see my GP weekly, my psychologist bi-weekly, but I felt somewhat accomplished, overcoming what seemed the worst of the worst. There's rock bottom. Thank you. There's rock bottom, and I felt like I'd found its basement. The recovery time preceding the night had its ups and downs, but I had overcome the worst. My dependency on Alex took a huge toll on her mental health. However, she stayed strong, and still to this day continues getting stronger and stronger. I used to often wonder, and sometimes still do, where I would have been if I didn't have my main support. My GP was my first port of call, and it went from there. The scariest part was not knowing what to expect and how things would end up. And that's why I'd encourage anyone who might be having their own battles to have a chat with someone you feel comfortable with, a GP. I'm sure everyone's heard the stats today. I've taken some off Mates in Construction's website. 190 Australians working in the construction industry every year take their own lives. Every second day there's someone who takes their own life in the construction industry. All of that information hit home and felt like it was right up my alley. I took up training under a general awareness training followed by a tiered program with 2 more levels of in-depth training. I completed the general awareness and the assist training they have to offer, and did so because I felt that if I could take anything away from what I had gone through, it could be to raise awareness and help out where I could. I was contacted by Mates in Construction not long after I completed the training. They had asked if I'd like to share my story with a journalist from Sydney Morning Herald who was writing a story covering the extent of suicide in the construction industry. I nervously agreed and have never looked back. The story was very well received, gained widespread support after the story was publicised. I recall an overwhelming amount of people, some I'd never even met, approached me in public telling me how my story helped them to speak out, and they no longer felt alone in their own personal journey with mental illness. I often recall on the mental health battle and how thankful I am I spoke up. When I speak to people facing their own battles, I can't stress to them enough that I know what it's like. I'm just a regular guy in my 20s. Nothing makes me any different to the next. I go to work, I have a family. I was usually told life always seemed good on the outside of me. That's what makes a lot of people suffering mental health issues the same. Life can look perfect to the person on the other side. Everyone has had bad days, off days, their own personal problems they might be facing, and more often than not, a brave face is put on. I'm here to tell you, you don't have to pretend things are okay if they're not. It's okay to say, and I hope that if anyone takes anything away from today, that just one person who might be struggling has a chat with someone. Once again, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you all for listening to my story, and thank you to the other speakers and presenters today.